The traditional midterm election map as we know it, it is completely dead. If you're looking at the 2026 battle for the Senate through the lens of a typical midterm cycle, you are looking at the wrong map entirely. This cycle's battleground isn't just slightly tweaked, it is completely inverted, creating this wild structural paradox that is already upending how both parties campaign, spend, and honestly just survive. Normally, a midterm cycle is a pretty straightforward referendum on whoever is sitting in the White House. But look at what's actually happening on the ground right now. Democrats are finding themselves playing intense, high-stakes defense in deep red Trump territory, specifically looking at states like Georgia and Michigan. Meanwhile, the absolute best offensive shot the Democrats have to flip a seat is all the way up in Maine, a blue state that went to Kamala Harris, but happens to be held by a firmly entrenched Republican. The defensive lines are totally backward. The inverted Senate map. The structural math dictating this map really comes down to one brutal number: 4. That is the net gain the Democratic Party needs to take the majority from the current 53-47 Republican split. When you realize they have to achieve that massive climb while defending seats in states that actively voted against their presidential nominee, it becomes a staggering mathematical hurdle. Georgia's historic cash advantage. To understand exactly how incumbents are trying to survive this inverted map, we have to look at Georgia, a state Donald Trump won. Incumbent Democrat Jon Ossoff is essentially building an impenetrable fortress. Over $81 million raised. Ossoff has amassed a financial wall so massive that he completely bypassed any serious primary challenge from within his own party. He is sitting on over $32 million in cash on hand, quite literally just waiting out his opponents. Now contrast Ossoff's absolute financial dominance with the reality for Republicans in Georgia. They are locked in a fractured, chaotic primary right now. Major high-profile figures opted out, which left candidates like Representative Mike Collins and former football coach Derek Dooley to fight it out. And because nobody hit an outright majority, they are bleeding resources in a highly contested, extremely expensive runoff. Yes, Mike Collins is the statistical favorite here, leading the polling average by 11.5%. But this protracted runoff severely delays the Republican Party's ability to pivot to general election messaging. Every single dollar they spend fighting each other in the primary is a dollar they don't have to counter Jon Ossoff's established, fully funded general election machine. Michigan's Democratic Civil War. If Georgia is all about incumbent survival and hoarding cash, Michigan is about internal party combustion. With incumbent Democrat Gary Peters retiring, an ideological civil war has completely burst onto the debate stage. Progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed looked right at his opponents at Mackinac Island and challenged them to raise their hands if they had never accepted money from Blue Cross Blue Shield. It was a stunning, highly aggressive moment that exposed some incredibly deep fault lines. You have three distinct lanes violently clashing here. El-Sayed is the Bernie Sanders-endorsed progressive, actively rejecting corporate PACs. Then you have Representative Haley Stevens, positioning herself as the pragmatic moderate, backed heavily by a pro-Israel super PAC that has already reserved $5 million in airtime. And right in the middle, Mallory McMurrow, who is arguing that ideological purity simply doesn't matter if you don't have the practical ability to construct legislative majorities. They are deeply divided over corporate influence and foreign policy, and they are alienating different factions of their own voter base in real time. So why is this infighting so incredibly dangerous? Because waiting on the other side is Mike Rogers, the presumptive Republican nominee whose path was largely cleared. While Democrats are trading blows over campaign finance, general election matchups already show Rogers in a statistical dead heat against the top Democrats. The margin for error here is effectively zero. Maine's unlikely outsider. While the Midwest burns, the most explosive human element of this entire map is Maine. In a total shock to the political ecosystem, two-term Governor Janet Mills, the establishment favorite specifically recruited by Chuck Schumer, suddenly suspended her campaign. Her reasoning? She literally ran out of cash. In a race of this magnitude, the premier establishment recruit simply could not sustain the financial burn rate required to compete. So stepping into the massive vacuum left by the governor is someone literally nobody in national leadership had on their bingo card: Graham Plattner, a 41-year-old veteran and, of all things, an oyster farmer. He has suddenly surged into the presumptuous nominee spot, rallying a massive populist base with heavyweight endorsements from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. But Plattner brings a staggering level of controversy to the ballot. His past includes a covered tattoo resembling the SS Totenkopf symbol, which he claims was unknowingly acquired while stationed in Europe. He's also facing intense fallout from a leaked archive of explicit, deleted Reddit posts under the username phustle, alongside highly polarizing podcast comments concerning military sniper Chris Kyle and foreign conflicts. Establishment Democrats are panicking over this background, calling it completely disqualifying. Yet, astonishingly, voters seem to be shrugging it off as just partisan noise, and his polling against incumbent Susan Collins is holding surprisingly strong. Here's the catch, though. Grassroots enthusiasm does not pay for television ads. Look at the financial exposure on the board. Plattner has proven he can raise money rapidly, pulling in $4.4 million recently, but his burn rate is massive, leaving him with just $2.2 million in the bank. Susan Collins, on the other hand, is sitting on a formidable $9.7 million war chest. And honestly, that $9.7 million is just the tip of the iceberg. Republican-aligned super PACs have already pre-booked a staggering $99 million in ad reservations to blanket Maine. They are relying heavily on non-disclosing donor networks to build an absolute impenetrable air cover campaign to try and save Susan Collins from this populist wave.
The Texas primary upset.
Let's pivot south, because the whole illusion of a safe seat just completely vanished in Texas. In a massive, earth-shaking primary upset, four-term incumbent Republican Senator John Cornyn was unseated. He was defeated by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who rode a late, decisive endorsement from Donald Trump to secure the nomination. The impact of that upset was instantaneous. The very moment Paxton, a candidate carrying significant legal and ethical controversies of his own, became the nominee, major election analysts shifted the state's rating. What was once viewed as a likely Republican lock is now rated as lean Republican. It instantly transformed a completely safe GOP stronghold into an incredibly expensive defensive battleground, forcing Republicans to suddenly spend millions protecting a state Trump won by 14 points.
The final battleground strategy.
When you pull all these wild, disparate threads together, you realize the front lines are expanding in ways neither party planned for. You have high-stakes special elections in Ohio, where Sherrod Brown is fighting to return to the chamber against Jon Husted, and another massive special election down in Florida. Factor in major landscape-altering retirements across Iowa, Wyoming, New Hampshire, and Minnesota, and both national parties are being forced to stretch their resources thinner and thinner across an increasingly volatile map. We are watching a cycle where every single conventional rule has been thrown out the window, with traditional models completely shattered by local primary civil wars, unprecedented candidate controversies, and massive unyielding surges of independent dark money. A critical question remains. When the dust finally settles on this inverted map, will it be structural money or pure populist disruption that ultimately dictates the balance of power in the Senate?
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.